Hi guys, welcome to Nature's Wisdom. My name is Hannah and we are on episode 3 today. And I have my herbal tea here. I invite you to get some tea or some coffee and just relax and enjoy this episode. Today we're going to talk about sun exposure and the hidden secrets to health and sun exposure. So this is something that is kind of feared, honestly. And most people think, well, we need to avoid the sun. We need to cover up whenever we go outside, wear sunscreen. Now, yes, we don't want to burn, but I want to show you today and kind of open up your eyes to see that there are a lot of benefits from sun exposure. And the public health agencies actually are beginning to realize this as well. So I want to start actually by quoting a review that was published in July of 2020. This was by the Eternal Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. So they voiced concerns about insufficient sun exposure. And I'm just going to read this to you real quickly. So it says, this article aims to alert the medical community and public health authorities to accumulating evidence on health benefits from sun exposure, which suggests that insufficient sun exposure is a significant public health problem. Studies in the past decade indicate that insufficient sun exposure may be responsible for 340,000 deaths in the United States and 480,000 deaths in Europe per year, and an increased incidence of breast cancer, colorectal cancer, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, autism, asthma, type 1 diabetes. So they're basically saying, hey, we're noticing that we have told people so much to avoid the sun because of the risk of skin cancer, but it's backfiring on us, right? So we're just seeing that there's a lot of health risks if we aren't getting good sun exposure daily. So I want to just show you how adequate sun exposure is going to far outweigh any risk from being in the sun. So let's start by going over some benefits of sun exposure. So probably the first thing that you're going to think about is vitamin D in the sun, right? So that's just one aspect of this, but we're going to talk about this first. So it's estimated that over 1 billion people are vitamin D deficient. So getting sun exposure too, it's the best way to get vitamin D, even over supplementation, which we will talk about that in a little while. But when we're exposed to sunshine, a cholesterol compound found in our skin is converted into a precursor of vitamin D. Then the body has to convert that precursor into an active form of vitamin D, and that's mostly done by the kidneys and the liver. And vitamin D is so important because we have vitamin D receptors throughout the body, and it's nearly found on every single cell. So it's playing a huge role in our health. So we need vitamin D to utilize minerals such as calcium and phosphorus, and it really helps to channel those minerals and tell them where they need to go and to go into the right places and not to calcify our tissues. So to go into the bones where we need calcium, for example. And then we know that vitamin D plays a big role in immunity. That's been on display. We've talked a lot about that since COVID happened. We have blood sugar balance and mood plays a big role in mood and reducing overall inflammation. The benefits of sun exposure, it doesn't stop at gaining adequate vitamin D levels though. So I want to make sure that we don't just stop there, but we're just scratching the surface, honestly. So let me talk about one other aspect too, circadian rhythm regulation. So our circadian rhythm is our sleep-wake cycle. It's going to govern how well you're sleeping. It's going to govern your hormones, how balanced they are. It's going to govern your stress hormones. So our 24-hour circadian rhythm, it starts in the morning when we are exposing our eyes to natural sunlight. And that is going to stimulate cortisol, a stress hormone. Now, we think of cortisol in a bad light a lot of times, but cortisol is actually needed for energy and makes us feel awake and alert, and it helps with inflammation even. So the body needs cortisol. We need stress hormones, but we need it in the right balance. So our circadian rhythm governs a lot of these hormones. But even bigger than that circadian rhythm is balanced or regulated because of sunlight and because of getting our eyes exposed to sunlight in the morning. So normally you'll have the most energy in the morning about 2 hours after waking. And that's the peak of our cortisol spike. And then as the day goes on, the cortisol is going to keep getting lower, 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 and lower until at night, we're going to have melatonin kick in. And then that's going to start to get us tired and sleepy and ready to go to bed. All of this is regulated by light and darkness, so the sun. One issue that we've kind of run into with our modern world is because we are on our phones late at night, we're looking at TVs, because of that light, that blue light coming from our electronics, it's really tricking our eyes to think that it's light outside. And we actually get this boost of energy a lot of times at night whenever we have these bright lights that are stimulating that cortisol production, where we need something that's going to be relaxing. We need to, dim the lights. We don't want to be having like all the lights on in the house at night, because we really want that melatonin production to start kicking in. So, unfortunately, just how we live is not very conducive to a healthy, regulated sleep-wake cycle or circadian rhythm, because we're just far removed from nature and being outside and being in the sun. One of the best things you can do is right after waking up, as soon as you wake up, go and expose your eyes to natural sunlight. And let that sun come in through your eyes and tell your body it's time to get up. It's time to have energy. It's time to be alert. And that is going to boost that cortisol production in the morning like it should and like it's normally supposed to be. And the same way at night, whenever you have the sunset, go outside around dusk and really expose your eyes to that sun setting. And it's going to tell your brain, okay, it's time to slow down. It's time to start getting tired, and it's time to start producing melatonin to get sleepy. So that is one amazing benefit of being outside and having sun exposure hitting our eyes and actually just being outside in nature. Another thing I want to talk about is how the sun and actually getting outside reduces inflammation. This is really, really interesting. There is evidence that sun exposure reduces inflammation on the body by vitamin D being one thing, as well as nitric oxide production. Okay, so nitric oxide, it's created when our skin is exposed to UVA rays coming from the sun. So this nitric oxide, it acts as a vasodilator. It increases circulation, it reduces blood pressure, and reduces inflammation. So the act of actually getting sun on your skin is going to produce that nitric oxide that's going to help with inflammation as well as getting sufficient vitamin D levels. Studies have also shown that sun exposure is beneficial for inflammatory conditions such as psoriasis, which is really amazing, and inflammatory bowel disease. So 2 inflammatory conditions. One study showed that higher sun exposure in the previous summer or winter reduced the risk of inflammatory bowel disease in pediatric patients. So those kids who had higher sun exposure had less inflammation in their inflammatory bowel disease. This is really promising because inflammatory bowel conditions are super common. We have IBS, Crohn's, things like that. That's a really, really common issue that people deal with. And doing something such as just getting outside and getting sun exposure could be one part of healing the body. And it's such a simple thing. It's free. Just going outside and getting sunshine, like that can make such a huge difference. The other thing I wanted to talk about too is serotonin production. Okay, so it's well known that most people feel like that they're more down or depressed when the sun isn't out, but it's interesting because the light does play a role into that, but actually getting outside and having the sun physically hit your skin is going to help with those happy hormones like serotonin. So research has shown that UV ray exposure on the skin has the ability to produce serotonin, which is amazing. So this is really powerful information because they've discovered that tryptophan hydroxylase. So this is an enzyme used in the synthesis of serotonin. It's present in our skin, okay? So serotonin transporters were also found in human skin cells that make up our epidermis or our skin here. So it's going to show that we can actually boost our serotonin levels by actually being outside and our skin producing some of those things that we need for serotonin. A study was done to investigate the relationship between serotonin and our skin was conducted with 53 volunteers, and they were divided into 2 groups. One group was exposed to UVA rays 6 times in a 3-week period, and the other group had no UV ray exposure. So the UVA group reported feeling significantly more balanced, satisfied, and strengthened after the first UV ray exposure. So it's just interesting, like their overall well-being, just feeling more balanced and calm and regulated, was greatly influenced just by getting UVA rays on their skin. Now, this is something we have to talk about, though, if we're talking about sun exposure. This is the big question. Okay, well, what about skin cancer, right? What about the fear surrounding that? What about burning your skin? While I feel like it's absolutely critical that we rethink how we believe about the skin, we should also take note that burning the skin is harmful, right? We never want to burn our skin. That should always be avoided. We really don't want to have that oxidative damage done to our skin, which could have skin damage and potential skin cancer, right? When we burn our skin, this is causing that free radical damage to our cells, like I just talked about. So that increases our risk of skin cancer. Although there's validity to contracting skin cancer, and it happens, right, such as melanomas, there are many other factors that I want to talk about to skin cancer besides just getting sun exposure. So that's something that health agencies fail to even communicate, is that just because we go outside and get burnt, right, even though that's not beneficial, there are other underlying factors in someone's health that makes them more susceptible even to being burnt. So lifestyle factors, one of the biggest things is consuming refined seed oils. So that's going to be your vegetable oil, canola oil, soybean, peanut oil. Those have all been linked to an increased risk of burning from sun exposure. So if you're wanting to have less sunburns, get a better base tan, you really want to remove those refined oils from your diet. Avoid them when you go out to eat because that is going to make a huge difference in the health of your skin and how much you burn from getting sun. So that's something that we really need to talk about. Something too that's very interesting is a 2005 comprehensive review found that frequent sun exposure, now without burning though, was found to decrease the risks of developing skin cancer in those who have outdoor occupations. So that goes to show that they're trying to say if you have an outdoor occupation and you're getting frequent sun exposure daily, you're going to have a decreased risk of burning and skin cancer because your skin is being exposed to the sun more frequently. Now, they also mentioned in the study that infrequent sun exposure resulted in burning, was shown to increase the risk of melanomas. So this would include people who have maybe office jobs or they don't get outside in the sun very much. And when they actually went to go outside, maybe during the weekend or a holiday, and which most likely resulted in a burn, they had a higher risk of melanoma. So that's just something that you can think about. And I'm going to put this study in the show notes so you can look at that. But that is something that we need to take advantage of, and just knowing that how amazing is it that we can actually protect our skin whenever we go outside and expose our skin to natural sunlight. That's actually protective. Now, we don't want to burn, but doing that more regularly is actually protecting our skin, which is so awesome. Sunscreen now is another topic that we want to consider whenever we're considering the risks of skin cancer specifically. So we know that sunscreen reduces the body's ability to produce vitamin D from the sun. I have a quote here, but it says, using sunscreen with an SPF of 15 or higher can decrease your ability to manufacture vitamin D by 99%. That's really crazy, honestly. So ultimately, if you're slathering yourself in sunscreen from head to toe and you're going outside, you are not absorbing much vitamin D at all. Again, too, I'm going to reference all of these different studies and things in the show notes. You guys can go back and take a look at that. But this information is really, really important because research has also found that skin cancer patients are commonly deficient in vitamin D. So not only does this vitamin boost immunity, right, but its deficiency is also associated with an increased risk of cancers such as colon, breast, and prostate cancers. So it's interesting that these people who maybe are avoiding the sun, and they somehow still get skin cancer from like a burn or something like that, like it was dependent on their vitamin D levels as well, which is very fascinating. So it goes to show that there is some protection even in your vitamin D level status. Now, let's say it's the winter, right? You're not getting much sunshine and we don't really know where your vitamin D levels are at, okay? So this is where vitamin D supplementation can come in. And I want to kind of share with you my thoughts on that and what I personally recommend. So I have to say, first and foremost, I do not recommend vitamin D supplements for a long-term use, especially whenever they are in isolation and you're just taking vitamin D by itself, and especially high doses. That is going to deplete other checks and balances that we have in the body with other nutrients, okay? So, for instance, taking vitamin D in isolation, we're not talking about getting, vitamin D from the sun, but supplements that can deplete your vitamin A or retinol in the body. So that has a interdependent relationship there. So we need to really be careful with taking a vitamin D supplementation. Now, we need vitamin K2 and magnesium for the utilization of vitamin D and for channeling calcium in the right direction to our bones, right? So if somebody was taking vitamin D for a very short time and they knew their levels were low and they wanted to take that, you would definitely want to make sure that you're having a vitamin K2 with that in combination with the D3, as well as doing vitamin A rich foods, such as like cod liver oil is really good. Butter, quality dairy, all of those things are rich in vitamin A and magnesium. So even though I would not recommend people taking vitamin D supplements and just getting it from the sun only, if you are taking that, you really want to make sure that you test your levels too. So let's get into that a little bit. If you think you need vitamin D, get your levels tested first to really ensure that you are indeed low, okay? So ask your doctor to test your active vitamin D3 levels, which is 1,25D. So a lot of times most doctors are only checking your inactive or your storage vitamin D levels, which is 25D on a lab test. And that's not really showing us much. It's just showing us how much the body has in storage. It's not showing us how much active vitamin D that you have for your body to actually utilize for your immune system and everything. So you really want to check your active vitamin D levels if you think you're low, which is 1,25D. And if you're going to take it, make sure, like I said, there's a vitamin K2 supplement with magnesium and getting that vitamin A foods. And then I would only do it for a short time if you really did need it, okay? And again, too, just taking vitamin D is not going to replace getting time in the sunshine. We've already talked about reduction in inflammation. We talked about serotonin production and your circadian rhythm regulation. Those are just a few examples of why we need to be outside, but don't think just by taking a supplement, you are going to get everything you need. You really need to still get outside in the sun each day. You can also get vitamin D from animal foods, which is really neat. You can get it from salmon, eggs, butter, and raw dairy. So honestly, I wouldn't worry too much unless you checked your active vitamin D3 levels and they were super low and your practitioner is asking you to supplement. You could look into that then, but even then, getting daily sun exposure and even getting some vitamin D from foods like that, honestly, I think you're doing okay with that. So, some more thoughts that I have about this. I recommend getting daily sun exposure without sunscreen in order to reap all of those benefits that we talked about, and to get active vitamin D levels and get adequate vitamin D, you want to expose as much skin as possible to gain the most benefits. So, go outside in your tank top and just kind of sit out in the sun. I would say for about 10 to 15 minutes a day would be sufficient, honestly, to get vitamin D. And this is something too that we have to realize. Go slow. Your ancestral heritage, your skin tone, all of these things are going to really play a huge role into how much sun your skin is going to be able to tolerate. So if you feel like your skin is burning, you're getting overheated, just go and get into the shade and just really take it slow. Just slowly build your tolerance, even if it's 5 minutes. If you can only do 5 minutes, you have really fair skin. Just do that daily, right? And then work up if you can to 10 to 15 minutes and really go at your own pace and go at your own tolerance. So a little bit too that I want to mention, I'm going to put this in the show notes, but I'm going to put some of my favorite sunscreens as well. Now, there are times where I will use a natural clean sunscreen if I'm going to be outside all day in the sun and I don't want to burn and I don't have access to shade. I'm not saying that you can't use sunscreen at all, but I'm going to put some of my favorite ones in the show notes for you guys so you can take a look at those. Another thing that I wanted to mention is the dminder app. Now, this is a really cool resource. If you are curious, this is something you can download on your phone and use it every day, but it's going to show you where you are according to your location and how much vitamin D you're going to be able to absorb during like noon, during 3 p.m., during the early morning hours. It's going to show you how much UV ray exposure you're going to be getting in your area. And that's really helpful whenever it comes to making sure that you're getting enough vitamin D from the sun. And it will track that for you. So that's just a really handy resource that I will also link in the show notes for you guys as well. So hopefully that gives you a really good understanding on the benefits of sun exposure, why we don't need to fear sun exposure. Yes, we don't want to burn, but we absolutely need the sun. We need the sun on our skin. We need to have that sun exposure into our eyes every day. So I hope that will give you guys some different thoughts to think about when it comes to really making sure that you're getting adequate vitamin D levels from the sun, as well as all of those other benefits. So stay tuned for more information whenever we talk about other fun episodes in the future. If you guys enjoyed this, please let me know. I would love it if you would also write a review for my podcast. That would be amazing. Tell me how much you've been learning, and that would just really help me to get my show out there and with more people seeing that. So thank you again, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode.